Welcome to another episode of Black Belts and Boardrooms. This is a podcast where we talk to leaders who have earned their stripes by doing the work and building their craft over the years of their journey. And today, Renard, I know I'm excited. I know you are too. I know we have a great one. Renard, who do we have today?
Oh man, it's a good day for a Friday. I will say that we have a great person on the show today. A person who has been in the intersection of technology, different industry, different sports arenas, etc. You name it, this person has been a part of it. I am glad to welcome Phillip McKibbins to the stage. How you doing?
I am excellent. Amir and Renard, thank you so much for having me on your show. I've been really looking forward to this for the last, I guess, month, and really excited. And as I said earlier, happy uh, heavenly birthday, mommy. Appreciate you, love you. Thank you for everything you've done for me. And look, I whatever I can do to help um, our young people that are going through the journey and going through the struggle to get to where we are, I want to do. And I hope to help make their journey smoother and easier, and quicker, because it took me a while before I got to the place where I am now. So, anyway, but thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate you.
Well, thank you for joining us today, Philip. So, I know you've had quite the journey. I'm just going to highlight some things. You were on a nuclear submarine,
Yes.
ESPN, Dallas Mavericks. I mean, that is a story life. You know, how so I'm not even going to ask, just how do we rationalize such greatness? How should we think about you?
Just think of me as a guy that puts his pants on like everybody else, a guy that has been a constant learner and has worked very hard for many years to just keep raising up. The bottom line is that my life, went through certain pivot points. I think a pivot point for me was being in Stamford, Connecticut, and about to go into the Comcast Entertainment, NBC Universal offices, where I was going to be working on the NHL blackouts. And, done that for several years and just normal day. And the phone rings and I don't know what is it about my phone. And people call me and I don't recognize the number, but I answer anyway. And the guy's like, hey, there's this company really interested in you. And I was in one of those moments where it's 30 minutes before airtime. So I'm focused on getting in there. And I just said, look, tell me the company or I'm going to hang up. And he says, oh, it's ESPN. And I pulled a car over. It was like one of those, pull it over. And I'm like, oh, okay. And so then we start talking. The gentleman's like, is there any way you can drive up to Bristol the next couple of days and spend time with us? And I was scheduled to go fly back to LA. And I was like, you know what? I can make that happen. And little did I know that was going to put me on an incredible journey. Spent a couple days with them, then went through several interviews with them virtually until they called me one day and said, "We want you to come spend a week with us. Oh, by the way, bring your wife because we're going to interview her too." And that was something I will tell you because she when we got there, she's like, they're not paying me, but I'm gonna sit here and talk to them. But what was funny about it was the whole time what they did was they just talked about me. They wanted to know what type of person I was, what type of leader, and they kept us separate all week. We'd only see each other when we get back to the hotel at night. And I'll tell you, my wife hates cold weather. And we get to the end of the week, they offer me the job and they say, we want you to take the weekend and then let us know on Monday and go out to dinner, on us. So we go to a really nice restaurant and I'm sitting there going, oh man, this is going to suck. There's no way I can take this job. She's not going to accept it. And next thing I know, she goes, you know what? Um, Let me go first. And I was like, okay. And she just said, you're going to take this job. And I was like, yes. Oh man, this is great. I can't wait till we move to Bristol and we should go house hunting this weekend and we should do this and that. She's like, hold on. I said, you're taking this job. I'm going back to Cali. I'll see you once a month. Good luck. And, and that's pretty much how it went down. Now, look, I've been with my wife for 45, soon to be 46 years. So we were able to withstand the being away from one another. But I will tell you, uh, for her to have the love for me, because she's like, you need to pursue your dream. And I mean, that's the ultimate dream job, to go work for ESPN. And I always get tickled when people tell me, hey, I love sports. And I'm like, yes, we all love sports. ESPN is a technology company. If you don't have the tech skills, you're not going to make it there. And little did I know by going there that my entire life was going to change. And it changed the day that the CTO for Disney walks in my office and says to me, who the hell are you? What do you do? And why should I let you keep your job? My reaction was, and I'll be honest, this is exactly what I did. Well, let me tell you who the hell I am. I'm Phillip McKibbins. My head was bobbing and I just totally lost it. And the guy was cracking up. He couldn't believe that I had just transformed like that. And we talked for 2 hours. He asked me a bunch of questions. And then he said, this has been one of the most entertaining conversations I've had at Disney. Can I come see you tomorrow? I was like, you the boss, you do what you want, come on. And he came back the next 3 days after, and we spoke 2 hours each day. And then the fifth day, he finally came back and he said, I don't want to talk today. I have an offer for you. And I'm like, well, what is it, sir? And he's like, I want you to be my second. I want you to run a technology portfolio. I want you to have my back. And he said, I've never met anybody who could explain the business the way you do from a technology perspective. And then he says, I'm going to call you the technology whisperer, and of course my head went, blew up. And then I said, well, out of curiosity, what's the biggest thing you want me to do? And I was stunned when he said this to me. He's like, look, I can't stand the CFO, freaking hate that guy. You're going to talk to him every week and every month on my behalf. All right. So are you good with that? And I'm like, so ended up taking it. And little did I know he was going to put me on the path. Every year he would give me the same edict. I want you to go into this department, figure out what's wrong, come back with a plan to how to fix it. And then I want you to execute. And he moved me around pretty much for the next 7.5 years, where I was in app development. I started in emerging technology. Then I went to infrastructure, then I went to cybersecurity. Then I was involved with the PMO. I mean, he just kept putting me around. And I'm thinking, man, I must be really doing a terrible job because he keeps moving me. And the last job was support. And he's like, I know you wrote the disaster recovery plan and the business continuity plan for the Walt Disney Company. I want you to figure out what's wrong with our support and fix it. And that last year, I spent a lot of time in the newsroom, a lot of time in support center, watching every feed, looking at all of our logs, and directing. I usually had a room of 20 people. It sort of looked like Star Trek, to be honest with you. People at the consoles and they're watching the whole activity. And that ended up being a great time for me. And what makes it even more interesting is that I found out during that last year that I had a brain tumor and was sick. And I remember having to go tell Aaron, hey, I gotta get this taken care of. And he was like, I laugh at it now, but he's like, I want you to just go home and spend time with your family. I'm like, no, dude, we got stuff to do, you know? And I went out to California, worked remotely for about 2 months until I had the surgery. And then I had the surgery, came back way too soon because I was worried about losing my job. But um, man, that guy, I can't thank him enough for his faith in me and putting me on the path. And I mean, I remember things like being in the office late at night with him and one of my colleagues, and he would walk into my office and say, "Come with me." And we would go into one of the labs and pull out the little treadway, you know, and we would race the treadway in the building. It was insane that we would do that stuff. But we just had so much fun. And I'd never been in a situation where I had a leader who really was like, I believe in you. I trust you. I had a chance to thank him right after getting the job with the Mavs. I saw him at the All Star game, and because I went for the NBA Technology Summit, and he was there, and it was just such a wonderful moment to be able to say thank you for putting me on the path. So, um, career is full of incidents like that, good things that have happened, a lot of failure. And I have to say that there's no such thing as being perfect and that you're going to fail and you're going to make mistakes. The thing that you hope is that the failures aren't big enough to take you out. You know, you want it to be to the point where whatever failure you have becomes a learning, teachable moment. And I've been so fortunate in my career that every place I've been, there's always been something that I've learned and grown, you know, from. So I hope that answers your initial question. Well, I know it's a little long winded, but I wanted to give you some background of who I am.
Philip, that is such an amazing story. I'm thinking about Disney and then all of the different things you were put on. A lot
Mhm.
of us, I think, if I can be a little general here, a lot of us don't get those kinds of opportunities, but to have the kind of leader you're describing, I'm
Mhm.
jealous. I would love to have a leader like that. I don't know about you, Renard, but I think we all should be blessed with such great leaders.
Well, I look, um, it was those 8 hours of talking. And the thing that he said that he admired, he's like, "You're the only person that has spoken truth to me." And I told him I believe in speaking truth to power. I'm not going to fake and shake. I'm not going to candy coat. I'm not going to understate. I'm going to tell it like it is. I'm going to indicate to you, you know, what risks we have. I'm going to talk to you about how we're going to mitigate those risks, and we're going to move forward. And basically, what he really did was put me on a digital transformation effort. That's really what it was, you know. And when I learned that the key to any digital transformation effort is alignment with the business. People think digital transformation is about technology. 30% of it's technology, 70% of it is the people. You know, I remember him telling me that because one day I said, you know, what's it like being the CTO? And he said, Phil, he said, you would think it'd be the greatest job imaginable. He said, but I spend more time dealing with people problems, people issues. And he said, you know, my colleagues, you know, some of them are jealous. Some of them have issues with me. Some of them don't like the fact that we have the bigger budgets. They don't understand that we're trying to support the entire enterprise. And he told me that whenever you get in a position like this, never forget, focus on the people, focus on listening, focus on learning each department. And in essence, what he did by moving me around is I had a chance to really learn each department that we had to deal with, as well as their stakeholders. And I was constantly finding out where the problems were. He used to always tell me, hey, focus on what keeps you up at night and figure out how you're going to solve those problems. And he said, a good night is when you can go to sleep without thinking about those things. And there were many a nights I'm sitting there, pad next to, my desk, or nightstand, and I'm writing down everything that's coming through my mind. Or, oh, I got to send this email out to this person. And I was notorious for sending emails at 3 a.m. in the morning. I mean, my team it used to drive them crazy. They're like, do you ever sleep? And I'm like, no, so when it hits me, I would do it. And I've learned over the years, okay, everybody can't necessarily deal with that, and I've learned to um, respect boundaries a little bit more. And I've also learned, like with my team, I tell them, look, we start at 9, we typically end at 5. For me, it doesn't end because I'm going to be here probably till 9 o'clock. But in that window of time, we need to give each other our best. We need to be 100% in tune with one another, 100% dialed in and focused. And then when we put it down at night, we need to rest, and we need to go have fun, be with our families. And he was a guy that actually helped me to learn how to do the work-life balance. Phenomenal dude. So I'm very blessed as a result of that.
Well, you said some important things, and I love where he let you see how the business run. I always say the better you know the more you know about the business, the better off you'll be. So if
Yeah.
you learn the business, then you understand how you can help the business from any position. So he gave you that opportunity, like Amir said, most don't get that opportunity. So he basically set you up for success, which is a good thing. He saw greatness in you, like I always say, if you might not even seen in yourself, but he said, "Hey, I see the opportunity for you, so I'm gonna put you in those right positions." And he let you run. So now that took off your career.
Yeah.
So I want to take a little step back. Even before your career, you were in the military.
Oh, yeah.
Before then. So I would love to hear your military story before you got into tech. Did you decide technology was going to be the next step? I'd love to hear that story.
Oh, wow. Well, oh boy. I originally went to school, to Fisk University in Nashville, Tennessee. And that's where I met my wife. And that's a whole nother story. Maybe we'll have time to get into it. But I ran into a situation where I ran out of money and I needed to leave Fisk. And I came up with the bright idea to move to California because my girl was from California. She's like, they'll give you more money. It'll be great. I get here, find out that they start when the new governor came in, he cut a lot of the programs and the scholarships. So I ended up going to Cal State Northridge. Lasted about a semester because that's all I could afford. And my soon to be wife's mother came in to the room because I was staying with them because I couldn't afford to stay on campus. And she's like, look, in our household, you either go to school or you join the military. And if you can't find the money to go to school, you need to join the military. And I was like, okay. So I ended up joining the Navy, and ended up testing well to get into the nuclear power program. And I volunteered to be in the submarine force and went through all that training and was fortunate enough to pick up a program that had the acronym BOOST, which stood for Broadened Opportunity for Officer Selection and Training. And they basically take you through your senior year of high school and your first 2 years of college in 1 year. All you do is go to class. You get up, you have inspection, you do the basic military stuff, and then you're in class all day long. Then when you get out, you have study table, till about 10, and then lights are out and you do it all over again. Uh, and the thing that I got from that, I was a pretty decent student and always had done well. I was an engineering student. But I discovered that engineering is applied math. It's really all it is. And if your math skills are weak, you're not going to make it as an engineer. So um, I really, really got much better in calculus and differential equations and all the things that I needed to learn. And then once I was taught how to solve word problems, how to apply, then everything opened up for me. Um, I wanted to be a biomedical engineer. There was only so many schools in the country that was offering it that also had an NROTC program, because what they do is they take you out of being enlisted. You become a civilian again or a reservist, and then you go to school. And then in the summertime, then you go serve. Um, so I was fortunate enough, because I had went through nuclear power school and went through sub school, that I only had a deployment of about a little bit more than 6 months on a sub on the East Coast, out of New London, Connecticut. And it's ironic because I ended up being aboard the USS Dallas, fast attack submarine. And what's even more ironic was when I went to boot camp in Great Lakes, Illinois, many of the guys that I went to boot camp with, I would always tell them, look, I want to be an officer. One day I'm going to be an officer. And about 6 years later, I'm assigned to the USS Dallas. I get there, and who do I see? 5 dudes that I went to boot camp with. And they're looking at me going, oh man, you made it happen. And I'm like, yeah, and being on that sub was a phenomenal experience. It's not for everybody, because there are no windows. This ain't no Disney thing where you looking out the window. No, there's no windows. And it's very tight quarters. And I'm a much bigger person now. When I was uh, in the sub, I was like 185, 6 feet, 185, and I struggled to get through, the little hole that you climb down to get in. It was always like I needed to grease up to get in because, I'm a pretty big dude. Now, oh my God, you just see feet dangling. I get stuck. There's no way I'd make it through. But anyway, on the sub, ended up being assigned to weapons. So I did weapons for a little bit. And then I ended up being assigned to damage control. And little did I know that was another pivotal moment in my life that was going to change my life. And so fast forward, I'm on my first deployment. We're down in the Caribbean doing prospective commanding officer drills. And we saw Soviet sub, which was typical. Wherever there's a port, there's a US sub and a Soviet sub. I guarantee it, off the coast of New York, Los Angeles, wherever, we have our stuff, they're there too, just like we are over there. So we're in the Caribbean, we're just doing our thing, and we had picked up a bunch of officers who were all learning to become commanding officers. And we're going through drills, and this particular Soviet sub thought we were being provocative, and they went to general quarters and fired their torpedo at us. And I will tell you, after months and months and months of training daily for those situations, you are not prepared. I don't care what anybody says. There's nothing like the real deal, you know? And when we went to general quarters and you heard that shrill in the water of the torpedo, because I will tell you, sound propagates perfectly through water. We could hear stuff on the outside. Oh my goodness. I had never been more scared in my life. And we went to general quarters. I went to the galley where we eat, because that's where the damage control team was going to assemble. And here I'm a young officer charged with leading a group of men into a space that's been damaged. The torpedo didn't hit us directly. It hit a canyon, but the shock wave caused, some damage to our hull. So we had a crack in the hull. It was about a 2-inch crack. You would think that's not a big deal, but it is, because underwater is great pressure. So that water was just streaming in like a faucet. And um, and my orders were to go um, and deal with that breach and seal the hull and save the boat. Well, I'm panicking. I thought I was ready, but I wasn't. And all I could do was just pray. And I looked at the men and I said, look, there are no atheists in foxholes. I'm not going to proselytize to you. What I'm going to do is pray right now, because I need to pray to just gather myself. You're more than welcome to pray with me. I said, we all believe in something, whether it's that piece of paper or your shipmate or God, Buddha, doesn't matter. Whatever you believe in, you're more than welcome to pray. So I just started praying for me and praying over everyone. And I'm thinking, man, you're 23 years old. You're not married. You haven't had children, and you're going to die. And they're not going to say died in combat. They're just going to classify it as missing in action. All right. That's what our military does. So, I'm praying, and then I said, Father God, if this be my last day on earth, at least show me the faces of my children. And I've been so blessed because God has answered my prayers. He's given me visions. He's given me a number of things, and he gave me a quick vision of my children as adults. And my children were holding their children. And when I saw my grandchildren, I knew, I'm like, you are not dying today. God would not show you this if it wasn't so. And I realized that I went from total fear to total faith. So when I saw that, the men even said, you look like a different person after you prayed. Because I was like, I got everybody in quite tight, like we were in a huddle. And I was like, gentlemen, we're going to go to that space. We've got 1 minute to get in, get this thing done, and get out. And I said, without the loss of one. I remember telling them that. We get there, we look down in the space, that water is gushing, and I look in their faces and they are petrified. And I'm going, how in the world are you going to tell Franklin and Joey and Skippy and Billy Bob to go down into that space? You're going to have to do it yourself. You're going to have to help them have faith that this can be done. So I was like, men, we got 1 minute. And then I went down the ladder and got into the space. My feet hit the pavement. The water was at my knees. And I was like, ooh, this is not good. And then the men climbed down. I started my watch, and I'm counting off the time. At 30 seconds, the water was at my waist. At 45 seconds, it was chest level. I stopped the stopwatch and I ordered everyone out. Because how you seal the hull, we had these big pieces of cork. It sounds ridiculous, but it's true. And we took the cork and a mallet and we're just hammering that cork until it got into the crevices. And what it does is it creates a seal. The wetness expands it, and then it equalizes the pressure. So I tell everybody to get out. Everybody climbs out. I'm the last person in there. And by then I was like, okay, this is probably it. You probably aren't going to make it, because the water was above my head. And I'm treading water, and the water was cold. And I just got calm. I just raised my hands. That's all I could do. And those men pulled me out. And when I got pulled out, I looked at them. We looked at one another. And then we sealed the hull and we fell back and we started doing snow angels. I don't know why we did that, but we did. And we're yelling and screaming. And then the captain came on the 1MC and he's like, Mr. McKibbins, come to my stateroom. And the guys was like, ooh. because he doesn't do that typically. He doesn't call because the whole boat hears this. So I thank the men for saving me, and I go see the captain. And when I go see the captain, words out of his mouth were, "In the hell were you thinking? Why would you go down in that space? Do you not know we spend $2.5 million training you? Send the men in." He was really saying, "They're expendable, you're not." And I said to him, "Sir, in all due respect, none of them would have went down there if I didn't go." And then I said, "How in the world can I expect a man to give his life for me if I won't give my life for him? These are my brothers. These are my shipmates. It must be done." So he's looking at me and he's like, "Just don't do it again." And then I'm like, "Well, if I'm faced with the same situation under the same circumstances, sir, I'd probably do it again." So then he says, "Okay, we're going to talk about this at dinner tonight with all the other officers." And then he dismissed me. And little did I know that not only was that incident going to set the stage for my career, it was going to put me in a whole different mindset of how I treated people, how I led folks, how I decided to focus on the team and not me. And in essence, when I had the opportunity to interview for the Dallas Mavericks CTO position, I told that story to St. Marshall, who was the CEO at the time. And because she asked me the question, "What is your leadership philosophy?" And I was like, "Can I tell you a story?" And I told her that story. And I'm like, "My leadership philosophy is I'm the type of person that's going to put it on the line every day. I'm going to lead from the front, not the back. I'm going to be a person that's going to be engaged, and I'm going to be a constant learner. I'm not going to walk in there thinking I'm the smartest person in the room. I'm going to be the most humble person in the room. I'm going to spend more time listening than talking, especially to my customers. And I'm going to probe, and I'm going to look at things holistically. And then I'm also break things down. And I'm always going to be thinking about, how do we make it better? How do we generate more revenue? How do we keep the lights on? How do we do better fan engagement? How do we, for example, I was talking about this earlier this morning because I was in a meeting with a customer, and I was explaining my focus wasn't the person sitting in the front row. You know, they paid their 2, 3, 4, 5,000 to sit there. They've got concert service. They're going to have a premium experience. My focus is that person in section 300 that worked all day long, worked for weeks to afford to go to one game to bring their family to, and they want to go buy a hot dog and a Coke, and it's going to cost them a ridiculous arm and a leg to do it. And when they get up to go get that food, they're going to be in line for 45 minutes waiting before they can get it and come back. And they would have missed all the third quarter and a little bit of the fourth. Those were the people that I was focused on. How do we change the experience for them? How do we bring that concierge service to that person? How do we make our restrooms more accessible? How do we direct people to the open lines for some of our concession stands or to an open stall so that we can make the experience better? And that's really leveraging and utilizing technology to solve a business problem. You know, as a result, our revenue increased because of utilizing technology. And that's the intersection. And that's what we as technologists need to focus on. And I'll tell anybody, look, nothing wrong with being a guy that keeps the lights on. That's great, but that ain't me. I mean, I can do it, and I do it, but I want to look. I want to get in the trenches. You know, I want to do special things. I want to create more revenue. I want excitement. I want our fans and our people to, you know, I used to say I would come on the radio and I would say, you know, come out to the Dallas Mavericks because almost anything could happen. You know, we're going to create such a unique experience that it's an experience of a lifetime. And I think when you step into the role and you have that philosophy and you work with your colleagues to try to make that happen, you can do something really unique and special. So I hope that makes sense. Once again, long-winded answer, but hey, it was my military experience. I wouldn't trade it for anything. And if I could go back now, I would. It was the greatest adventure of my life, being on a submarine, serving our country, knowing that we were really there to protect the fleet and there to protect freedom around the world. And I feel for our servicemen and women. They have a very tough challenge and they need our love and support and our prayers daily because it's not an easy life, you know. And I will say this: when I was in a sub, it was only men. Now it's men and women, and that's a challenge, you know, because on a fast attack sub you can only have 99 people, and you sleep in close quarters. And the one thing I remember the most of my experience, remember the first day I got there, um, we were told that we would have to hot rack. And hot racking is where you have three people assigned to the same bunk bed. And yeah, I know it's not pleasant. So you work in shifts. You don't know. I mean, you can't see the sun or whatever unless you go up top. But you work in shifts where you may be on watch for 4 hours, and then you have your lab or other work for 8 hours, and then you have 8 hours off, and then you have training for 8 hours. So the three people would all be on different schedules. So when I first got there, I was like, I am not sleeping in this bed where this dude slept. Because look, it's nasty. It is, you know, because you're sweaty, you're dirty, it's a trip. So what I did, I said, look, I don't want a hot rack. I'll take any rack. And the rack I was given was the rack at the very top. And what you have is a space, uh, well, not about no 16 to 18 inches depth. And you got pipes and stuff going all over top. So how you would get in bed, that's how you're gonna sleep. There's no rolling on your side or turning over. You learn to sleep still. And my first week, I had all types of speed knots on my head because I forget where I was and I'd hit a pipe. But you learn to sleep real still. And to me, it was worth sleeping like I was in a coffin than hot racking. So, and then eventually when became an officer, I got my own space. So it was okay. But I wouldn't trade it for anything. The things that happen aboard a sub, the life lessons, the stories that are told, you see people's true character. And it is a great experience. You know, I used to be the dude because I didn't drink and I didn't party a lot. So I usually would be the guy that was a designated driver. When we pull into port, you know, I'd be the guy, standing watch at the ship, or I would be on MP duty, military police duty, and we'd be the ones that would go into the bars and the strip clubs and pull our sailors out because you never leave one behind. And I can remember many a times having to go grab dudes, especially like when I was, oh man, when I was stationed in Great Lakes, Illinois. I never knew what coldness was until I was on Lake Michigan for about a year. And then watching how my shipmates would go to Milwaukee and get tore up drunk, and we'd have to come back and have inspection that next morning. And they would be knocked out sleep in the car. And the moment that cold hawk would hit them, it would sober them up like, like they were on Notos or something. And I was always a designated driver dude because I didn't get into all that stuff. And I used to look at it as an honor of being the guy that would go get his shipmate out of harm's way. and I'm still kind of like that to this day. I'm always trying to help people. I think that's one of the reasons why I went into coaching too, because I love teaching folks and helping them succeed, and for the most part, it's a good thing. Sometimes it can kind of get you in trouble because people can take advantage of your kindness, but that's who I am. So the military, greatest adventure ever, ever. So
Philip, I love how you storytell. I think that is a wonderful skill that every leader should develop. And you've had such a rich experience. So what I'm curious to ask you now is that, you've built your leadership philosophy over the years. You've taken every experience and you've built on it. At least that's what it seems to me you've done, starting from your military career and all the leadership skills you gained from just being there and leading those folks, including the near death experience you described to us. If there was one lesson you could leave with young folks today with respect to leadership philosophy and building their own leadership philosophy as a foundation, what would you tell them?
I would tell them the same thing I tell my daughter constantly. My daughter will call me and say, I don't understand why I'm not the president of the company. I'm the vice president. I do this, I do that. And I usually listen. And then when she finally comes up for air, I tell her, put in the work, be humble, be a constant learner. Your time will come. Seek those opportunities to do projects that nobody else wants to do. And you just kill it. Even if you don't know what to do, seek it. Find out people who can help you, that can coach you and mentor you, and then go execute. I mean, that's really what I ended up doing. You know, None of that stuff. Every time I got put in those new areas, it was foreign to me. And I'm sure you can imagine the people that I was put over resented the fact that I was put in as their boss. So I had to disarm them by coming in and being humble and listening. And then once they realized that I cared, then they were willing to do anything for me. So be a life learner, be humble, and take risks, and understand it will come with time. And you have to fail. You have to figure out what's right and what's wrong, because that's how you grow. When everything's going well, you don't learn nothing from that. It's when stuff isn't working properly. I always think about when I was at ESPN, and I remember being in a situation where um, we were having a problem with one of the systems, and the vendor had certified it. And I'm sitting there going, guys, this doesn't feel right. And everybody looking at me like I'm crazy. And I'm going, let's look at the logs. Let's eliminate our bias because we think because the vendor said it's cool, everything's cool. And lo and behold, as we start looking at the logs, we realize that there was a subroutine that did not get properly tested and did not go through our protocols of going through staging and proving it out, and we were able to catch it, and then we ended up rolling back before we had a significant outage. We're 30 minutes away from kickoff for Saturday Night Football, which was like the premier event. And there is nothing worse in television than black air. Can't have it. I've seen people lose their careers, over 30 seconds of black air. So you better pay attention and you better use the stuff you learn, to get better and improve. So I hope I answered your question.
Yeah. Work at your craft, look for opportunities. Your time will come. I think those are great words of advice.
Well, I just hope it comes sooner because look, I'm an old cat, and it took a while, for me. And I remember being frustrated going, I don't understand why I'm not a manager. I'm doing the work of the manager. Oh, I don't understand why I'm not a director. I'm doing the work of the director. Oh, I don't understand why I'm not a VP. I'm doing the work of a VP. When I finally said, stop worrying about it and just get the job done, no matter what it takes, then all of a sudden the positions start coming, but once you prepare for those moments, then you can rightfully step into those roles. I've got guys that have worked with me that um, I remember them, saying to me, "Well, I don't understand why, you know, um, we don't see you doing this and we don't see you doing that." And I'm like, guys, look, my days of coding, are pretty much over. If I have to, I can. If I have to do a code review, I can. If I have to take over the network, I can. I remember talking to my chief of staff one day, explaining to her that you got to have somebody who can see it all. When you're down into the details, that's great for that moment, but you're going to miss everything else, you know? So to think that the leader is going to be the single person that's going to do everything is ridiculous. It truly takes a village, to keep the ship upright, to keep things going smoothly. You got to have good people, people that you trust, people that respect you, people that are going to come to work and get it done. And I've had a variety of folks, dealing with technical people, not easy, and I'm sure you guys can relate because you have to learn to speak multiple languages, you know, and to understand what makes them tick. I still remember the dudes that were Marvel guys, so I'd have to give Marvel analogies for them to get it. I still remember the guys that were Dungeon and Dragons people. I had to go to my son one day and go, teach me how to play Dungeons and Dragons so I can relate to my Dungeons and Dragons crew. You know, um, I've had to do all those things because you've got to be able to wear many hats. In order to lead folks. And one of the biggest misnomers is that you don't have to be an expert. What you need to be is a person that understands people and can move people. That's really the course of the job. And Aaron was spot on. The higher up you get, the more people issues and problems you had to deal with. The more egos you had to deal with too. Yeah. And I was having this interesting debate with my wife the other day, and I was telling her one of the toughest things is to be considered the smartest person in the room and to not flex as the smartest person. Now we got in this big debate. She's like, "Oh, you're gonna turn people off by saying that." I'm like, "Look, trust me, they're already thinking it. They know that I'm at a certain level intellectually. All right. But the key is for me not to be, well, I'm the smartest person. No, I need to be the most humble person. I need to be like, help me to understand what we're doing. Help me to understand you. Help me to understand what those issues and problems are so that I can bring my talents to the table to help you. I'm the consummate, when we are successful, it's the team, the team. I always think about that great speech from Bo Schembechler when he was talking to his team and he kept talking about it's the team. It ain't you. It's not the quarterback. It's not the defensive back. It's not the center. It's the team. And I try to keep that same philosophy. And that's blasphemous for me to say because I'm from Columbus, Ohio. I'm a dire Buckeye, and for me to even use that name is blasphemous. But I got to give props to him. He's a great coach, and he was spot on about um, being able to lead men and women and be successful. It's just all about the team.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's all about team. That's why you see some college teams with no names on the back because it's about the team. No one gets a name.
That's right.
What's that? I think with Alabama, Penn State, etc. No names on the back because it's about the team at the end of the day. So of course, since we have a CTO on the show, we got to talk about AI, of course. That'd
Okay.
be weird if we didn't talk about AI. So I have to ask what, you've seen technology change in so many different avenues. We were at a point, we're at .com, we were at dial-up, turn to broadband, turn to fiber. Now we're at the pinnacle of AI. It's just starting out. What do you feel like you're seeing the change of what's happening with AI to a company that you currently work for? Any previous? What do you think that AI change is happening, just in IT in general?
Well, um, my wife would be giving me the shut up sign right now because I'm gonna say stuff that she thinks is controversial. One of the worst things that could have ever happened was when these big time tech leaders, Tesla and Meta and Google, start laying people off. Skilled, talented people of the promise of, well, AI is going to solve the problem. Here's the reality. I've got a good friend who's way up in the Google sphere, and he was telling me this the other day. He said, we laid off all these middle managers, and now a lot of the things that we need to get done can't get done because the people who are on the top, who haven't been middle managers for years, either don't know how to do it anymore or don't want to do it. And the people at the bottom are too young and green, and they're going to make tremendous amount of mistakes. So a lot of it doesn't get done. And the notion that AI was just going to just automatically make everything better and we don't need all these people is foolish. Now, I've been doing quite a bit of consulting for a number of professional sports teams. And one of the first things I ask them when we get on this topic of AI is I ask them, do you have an AI strategy? And usually it's like, well, yeah, well, the CEO just wants this done. And I'm like, that ain't an AI strategy. You know, I've been in different boardrooms and I've talked with different CEOs and I've asked them, well, what do you want to do? Well, I don't know. We just need AI. And I'm like, no, you need to know exactly what you want to do. So one of the things I start with is I tell them, well, look, let's talk about your business strategy. And then let's do the work to figure out how we're going to adapt your business strategy to become your AI strategy because it's got to be hand in hand. Um, Now, to me, AI is uh, a great example of digital transformation like no other. You can do things with AI that used to take us days, weeks, hours, months to do. And I'll tell anybody that AI exposes your technical debt and your data problems. I mean, upfront, immediate, it shows you, you got a problem. So you got to think that. It forces you to focus on how are we going to reimagine our processes, our workflow, our use cases. It's going to accelerate any and everything that we do. One of the biggest challenges is governance. Most folks don't have an AI strategy and they don't have AI governance. One of the worst things you can do is be in a situation where you start trying to roll out AI, or AI tools and AI components, and you have no strategy, you have no guardrails, you have, no protections in place. It's sad because I was talking with the CIO of the former CIO of the Phoenix Suns. It's about 9 months ago. We're at a conference and he was asking me, well, how do you deal with AI? And I said, carefully. I said, first off, we locked everything down. We're not allowing any and everybody to just be using whatever rogue tool they want relative to the job. And as we kept talking, I was like, look, if we come up with our strategy, we put guardrails in place, we protect the data, then we won't have breaches. And then he confessed to me, he said, I had to take early retirement because I wasn't watching that. And one of our people brought in an AI tool and then exposed our general ledger, and it was bad. So for me, what I'll tell people is, first off, um, understand that AI is as good as the people that you have programming it. You know, it's going to have its biases, it's going to have its flaws, it's going to have its good things, it's going to be a little bit of everything. The other thing is that it's going to redefine your customer focus, your operating model. It's going to do all of those things. So for me, one of the things that I tried to do was, one, get through legal and compliance on going, this is how we want to use it. You know, an effective use case for it was, look, you know, we're spending about $300,000 a year bringing in temp people to write marketing plans. We don't need to do that anymore. If we create the use cases and define all of our requirements and pick the right tool, we can develop some of these marketing plans, you know, with the right tool. But then we need to make sure we have appropriate peer review to go through everything to make sure that we have dotted the I's, crossed the T's, and that we don't have hallucinations and stuff. And then we need to make those mid-course adjustments, and then we need to leverage it and use it. From a financial standpoint, whatever ERP system, you know, that you use, and whatever CRM system that you use. I mean, people like Salesforce are doing a really great job of integrating components of AI to speed things up. They're also doing some great things with reporting. So, you know, you need to look at it strictly as what it is. It is a tool. It's a workflow. It's a functioning tool that's going to speed things up. I remember, shoot, it was a year ago. I was like, I don't need that. And my wife, one day I'm looking up and she's like, hey, I want you to look at this. And she's using it every day. Then my kids start using it. Then finally I said, dude, you got to stop being an old curmudgeon old man and you better start learning this stuff yourself. And boy, am I glad that I did, because I use AI tools every day now. You know, it's just a normal part of what I do. I caution, I was actually at a seminar a couple weeks ago, and we had all these people in the room, very intelligent, bright people. And they were like, yeah, you know, AI does my coding. And I was like, stop right there. You know, there's nothing wrong with leveraging some of the tools to help you. But if you don't do the code reviews and if you don't really know what you're trying to do, you are asking for a problem, because it's going to incorporate its biases and issues and problems. And if you're not paying attention, it's going to bite you at a time when you don't need it to bite you. Now, the other thing about AI, I was meeting with this big time producer in Hollywood. We were talking about some work because he represents a number of big time clients. And he was telling me a number of the actors were really upset because they're thinking, oh, man, AI is going to take over, and I'm going to be out of a job. And the same stuff that other people are feeling. And I remember telling him, dude, no, stop. The people who should be worried about this are background actors, not the lead people. I said, what you should be doing is embracing it and telling your people this is a name, image, and likeness situation. So negotiate the NIL rights for your image and get paid. If they want to do an AI based thing of your image and your voice, God bless them. You know, cast a check. And that's what I told him. Next thing I know, I found myself sitting in a Paramount boardroom explaining this concept to the people, going, uh, stop worrying about this. This is just the next two. And, you know, it's interesting how you were making references, Renard. I reminded him, remember, it wasn't that long ago that y'all were tripping about digital cameras? Remember that? Remember how it had to be a certain way and you didn't want to do that because you thought that the cameras weren't the same quality, but the cameras kept getting better and better and better. You know, remember, you know, all these different things. And I'm like, it wasn't that long ago that we were just getting personal computers. I still remember that I was watching the show Timeless, and me and my wife were cracking up because my kids was like, "What are they doing?" And they were showing this episode, and they were talking about the moon landing, and they were showing the data strip and the punch cards, and I was like, "Boy, I remember doing those." And my kids was like, "What in the world are you talking about?" And I'm like, "That's how we used to code." And I mean, technology is at the speed of light, you know, and within 5 years, we're going to be on a whole nother, trajectory. I tell people right now, start learning agentic AI. It's the next evolution from generative AI. Start learning RAG. Start learning. Actually, at the same seminar, you know, they were like, "Well, you're working with Privé, and how are you successful?" And I said, "We're successful because we started to realize that we needed to normalize our architectures. Why are we trying to build this from scratch? Why don't we leverage existing architectures because there's different rags that we can use and let's standardize on them." And then I found myself saying, "Guys, talking to the development team, comment the code." And they're looking at me like I'm crazy. And I'm going, "You may not be with us a month from now, 6 weeks from now. Comment the code so that anybody should be able to pick it up, know what you've done, and be able to move forward." I remember doing my first code review with the team, and they were freaking out. They're like, "You're actually going through this?" I'm like, "Yes." You know, I was with a friend of mine the other day, and she was like, "Well, how do you solve some of these problems?" And I just handed her a traceability matrix, and I said, "Use this. Take every requirement, every use case, trace it back to the code, trace it back to the test. And as long as it all checks out, you should have minimal defects and you should be fine." And you would have thought I was bringing manna from heaven when I handed this to her because it never dawned on her, that developers make mistakes. QA people make mistakes. I remember being at ESPN and taking over QA, how upset people got with me because I was rejecting their code. And I was like, "Guys, look at me as the failsafe. I saved you embarrassment, saved us a lot of money and time. Look, you're going to make mistakes. It's okay. Just let's go back and fix it and let's keep moving forward. That little bit of time that you're going to spend fixing this will save us the many hours in pain of having to sit in front of the CTO and explain why we didn't follow procedure." And the same guy that I was talking about, I remember we had an outage once. It was the worst 2 weeks of my life, professional life. And it wasn't even my fault. It was somebody, some technician at Verizon cut a fiber line and everything went down. And it took, I remember us working around the clock for 3 days, troubleshooting, and we had to go through every single system, every routine. And when we finally was like, it all checks out, everything is operational on our side, Verizon refused to accept that it was them. And then we found the problem and had to show it to their people. And oh man, I actually felt bad for them because the words that came out of the mouth of my CTO, I didn't even know you could make combinations of what he was making. But that has always stuck with me. And it's always made me very sensitive to let's get it right the first time, because it's going to take a lot longer to go back and fix it, after the fact. So, did I answer your AI question?
You did. You did.
Okay.
Amir, what do you think?
Well, I'm actually very happy to hear this because in my head, I'm thinking, requirements engineering used to be an art form and it's making a comeback,
Yeah.
a big time comeback. It's just not called requirements engineering anymore because that's an old moniker for it, right? So
Yeah.
the stories you've shared, it tells me that yes, we do need to have those specifications in a way that traceability matrices will go back and tie the dots or, fill in the dots for us. All of those things are making a comeback. In fact, I'm thinking, rational unified process, if anybody still
Oh,
remembers that.
oh man. Yes, I do. I do.
you
Yeah.
know?
I mean, look, there was a reason why we were successful back in the day. You don't just throw that stuff out. I mean, you refine things, it becomes simpler, it becomes easier, but the principles still remain, you know? Um, you code. It's funny because I was telling this to my team one day, and they looked at me like I had two heads when I said, "Why are we developing code for web and code for mobile?" And they're like, "Well, this is just the way we do it." And I'm like, "No, why don't we write one code base, unified code, it's architected in such a way where when we need to make a change, we make it one time, not two times, not in two locations, And I remember painstakingly trying to explain that the extra week of time it takes us to build this out as one unified platform is going to save us tremendous amounts of hours and heartache. And I learned that from the CTO from ESPN, that if you just spend a little bit more time planning, you can write it as one. So then when you test it, you actually end up having less test cycles. It's easier to find some of the problems. Now the counter is, well, if it fails, everything goes down. But it's like, no, it's not going to fail because, we're looking at it from the standpoint of we've already set up, all the environments. We have the separations. We don't move from development, to QA and to staging until everything checks off. And then when we promote to production, everything needs to be solid. And it just makes me think about the AI piece because with the company that I was just working with, I remember explaining to the founder um, the MVP is just a basic proof of concept. It's an animation. It's really all it is. It ain't prod. And um, if you don't understand the things that we're going to need to do to take this from an MVP stage to making it even viable enough to be in development before we can promote it to these other stages to the time we get to prod, you're mistaken, and that you're not going to be able to just use no code. And cause she would always tell me, oh, I was able to do it myself. And I'm like, God bless you. But if you're trying to ship this and use this for very large customers, I was trying to explain to her one day that, um, you know, we've got to develop this in such a way where this is going to be compliant with Visa rails, which means we've got to learn their methodology and start building it into our code, and that it's going to take us months. This ain't a little quick thing that you do and you just write a routine and ask Claude to do some code for you. No, you know, and it's funny because there's this thing going on between the product people and engineers because that used to always be separate, and now you've got it's such mixing that they're all doing some of the same things. And I'll tell people there's a reason why you need to have that separation. There's a reason why you need to have different eyes on it. I learned very early in my career, the more eyes you have on it, the better, And I know when my son was taking his first coding class, he was just pulling his hair out. He could not understand how he couldn't get it to work. And I'm like, oh, let me take a look at it. I was like, oh, your problem's right there, syntax error. And he's like, what? I'm like, dude, that right one little thing, then I fixed it, program ran. Next thing I know, he's like, I'm dropping computer science. I was like, dude, stop. But it's funny because he now looks at it and goes, he told me the other day, is that not life? A lot of times it's the things that are sitting right in front of us that it's hard for us to see because we condition it to be perfect. I told him, look, I don't know how many times I've written code and I couldn't see the problem because it's in my head. It's working exactly the way it's supposed to in my head, but it's not once you compile it and send it off, it's not working properly. So you've got to have the discipline to take that step back and look at each routine line by line. ESPN, one of the first projects they put me on was the refactoring of the bottom lines. And the bottom lines is a scrolling ticker. It's what everybody has now. And at ESPN, that is the biggest program. It has close to 2 million lines of code in it. And when we need to refactor that, it was a bear to go back and figure out what the heck did these people do. And one of the things that I learned early on was in our refactoring, the intent is to make it simpler. The intent is to replace, 100,000 lines of code with just a few lines, and that we need to be more transparent, not, black box on this stuff, and a lot of young developers have struggled with that because they didn't have to go through some of the classes we had to go through. They didn't have to learn how, we solve those problems. So when they're facing it in the workplace, a lot of times they don't know what to do because it was all laid out there for them. So I don't want to sound like an old man that's grumpy, but that's just the reality of it. So
Yeah, I mean, there's such one we could probably keep going on and on and on about such a rich history, such a rich career, Philip. I mean, right now, just sitting here in awe with all the stories you've shared.
I'm just well, first off, I'm a normal cat. I can't. You need to. I'm gonna peel back the onion on y'all for a second. All right. You probably figured out if you haven't that I come from a long line of preachers. All right. My grandfather was the best friend of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s father, Martin Luther King Sr. They were next door neighbors. All my uncles became ministers. My dad didn't until later in life. Then he decided he wanted to do it. And I remember as a boy going, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. And then I used to be a terrible storyteller. And then one day I was like, man, I remember asking God, you help me to be a better storyteller. And it was my sister who passed a few years ago who helped me the most when she said, I've heard you speak publicly, and the moments when you kept it real and spoke from your heart were the best moments. She said, stop trying to be like Les Brown. Stop trying to be like John Maxwell. Stop trying to talk like just be you. And once I learned to be more of my authentic self and just talk about it's in many ways it's using the STAR method, the situation, task, action, result, but just blending it in such a way where you're going through the peaks and valleys. Yeah. And when I'm working with our customers and our coworkers, um, when I worked at IBM, one of the I'll never forget my boss. Her name was Mary Harris, and that woman gave me a gift that keeps on giving. I remember her showing me, I'm going to teach you how to do a JAD session, a joint application development session. And she said, you're going to use this for the rest of your life. And she's right. And I mean, now people think of it as a white paper or a brown paper session or a post-it or a sticky note. It's the same stuff. But she taught me how to get the paper, how to make the paper sticky, how to take your old punch cards and turn them into post-its, and how to move the stuff around, and how to craft a story from general drilling down to the very specific. And that's really what a jazz session is about. You start with a general concept and you keep going and you keep going to the nth degree till you nail every single requirement. And for me, storytelling has become synonymous with that. How do I take people on a journey? You know, now sometimes it gets me in trouble because people will go, "Oh, you're full of all these stories, blah blah blah." Yeah, but it's just those life experiences, and I want to share. My kids are so freaking funny because I used to take them to school in the morning, and we'd have to drive several miles to get them to school. And they would always ask me these questions that would make me have to pause and think. And we were sitting around a dinner table about a year ago, and they were like, we used to ask you stuff just to see you get upset or just to see you get mad, or and it was a sport to them. And I laugh at it because that was very valuable time, because I hear them now when they're talking to their friends or whatever, they repeat some of those stories. So it tells me it got through to them, that they got the essence and they understand it. So look, I'm one of these people that I love doing this. I love sharing. I'm more than willing to come on anytime you guys want. I can talk about a lot of topics. I know one of my buddies was like, make sure you tell them about the new product Dooley that's going to change people's lives. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to talk about that. And because I've got a good friend who has developed this incredible product that's going to change how we consume data social media wise, and it's going to change the influencer game. And he was telling me the other day that they just signed Angel Reese, and she's going to come out with a big thing about the product. And I was talking with Dee Dee McGuire's brother, who's their business manager, this morning. We gave him a demo, and he was just like, Phil, this is going to be a game changer. It's going to open up the way we communicate with people. And when I look at that, I found myself last night talking to my wife about, because she's like, I want you to be more understated and don't be showy and don't be out there. And I was telling her, I was talking with this career coach the other day, and he was telling me, you need to develop multiple revenue streams. You need to get out there more. You need to um, consult when you can. You need to do more public speaking. He was talking to me about my book. My book will soon, I actually finished the manuscript last night, finished the edit of it, and is ready to go to the publisher. The title of it is Sight Unseen. Is How to Become a CTO, CIO in a Fortune 500 company. And I wrote it because a dear friend of mine who was the number two at WWE had been telling me for years, dude, if you would just share with people what you know, he's like, you're not anything I've ever seen before as a technologist. He said, you seem to be able to really get with business people and get to the heart of stuff. And you need to teach technical people how to be less technical, how to be more human. And this book is really about the journey. If you want to become this, these are the things you need to do. These are the challenges you need to face. And I can't wait till it comes out. I was on a podcast and I was giving little snippets about it, and I found myself in a situation where some people reached out to me on LinkedIn, a person from China, a person from Saudi Arabia, and I'm drawing a blank on the other country. And they're like, "Yeah, I heard you. Will you come speak and teach this?" And then I found myself, I was talking to the publisher, and I'm like, "Look, we need to do an ebook, we need to do an audio book, and we need to put it in multiple languages." Because, um, I'm uh, I'm just trying to keep it real with people. It's for me, it's about giving it away. What am I going to do holding on to all this knowledge and taking it to the grave? No. If I can impart knowledge, wisdom, or whatever to anyone that's going to help them with their journey, that's what we're here for. And that's what I want to do. So I promise you guys, when the book is published, there's 2 copies I'm going to sign for both of you so you can have it. It's a great reference book that you can use it. I'm no guru, but I keep it real, and I help with the journey. I even found myself going back to the manuscript going, you need to work on that more. You need to improve on that more. Because one thing I learned in life is the biblical principle of faith. Faith coming by hearing. Now, the scripture says hearing the word of God, but that's a biblical principle. You hear it enough, you say it enough, you start believing in it enough, then it'll become so. And that's really important. So, we need to coach up, teach people how to do the jobs that we do because our jobs are hard. Me and my wife were talking about this last night, and I was telling her if you look at everybody in the C suite, you show me anybody else in the C suite that has to deal with everybody. Your marketing, you deal with our customer, you deal with, from a marketing perspective, but you don't have to care about what this other person's doing. CFO typically tends to hate you because you're the one spending money and they don't want you spending money, and you got to find a way to deal with them and help them to understand that this is an investment. We're going to spend this and the results are going to be that. We're going to generate more revenue because of this. I'm thinking about, I don't know how many times I've found myself in a situation where that person runs off and gets their own little shadow IT because they listen to some consultant that told them, oh, yeah, we can roll this out. And they don't have a clue about any of the stuff that's really going on in the company. And they just give them something, they cash that check, and they're gone, you know? And we're the ones that a lot of times have to pick up the scraps and then try to figure it out. So our job is extremely difficult. Of the C-suite, we're in a pickle. I found myself talking to a bunch of people when I was at the Mavs, and I was explaining to them the difference between the CTO and the CIO, and they were struggling with that. And I was brought in to be forward thinking, to create new strategy, to create new things, to get us into new markets, to create the art of the possible. If you wanted somebody to just keep the lights on, that's the other dude. That ain't me. I mean, I'll do it. And yeah, and because I got to wear two hats, I'm doing it, but that can't be my singular role. That'd be like if I'm the other guy and you come in saying, you know what, we need new innovation. And you're like, what? Innovation? Oh, it's supposed to work. It's supposed to turn off. That's what I do. So you need both, to make your organization as whole as possible. And as I've been going through different interviews recently, I've had to tell people, if this is what you're looking for, I'm going to step out because that's not, at this point in my life, that's not what I want to do. And you're not going to get the best from me as a result. So if you're looking for that, then you should focus on other candidates. And they're looking at me like I'm crazy. And I'm like going, but you need to understand, I'm at a different point in my life where I'm not trying to just take something just to take something. You know, I want to move the needle every single day, and I want our days to be the best. I want everyone to be able to achieve their objectives, and to, make sure that their, you know, um, OKRs are exactly what they're supposed to be. Because we have the ability to do that. So anyway, I'm just, look, like I said, I'm very blessed. I appreciate now my family heritage. I appreciate that I've learned to slow down, learn to think, and just learn to open my mouth. And I don't know how many times I sat in meetings and people be like, he barely says anything, and I'm like, because I'm listening. You know, I remember explaining this to CEO of the Mavs that we just had our staff meeting. They're talking about all their issues, and I'm asking questions and I'm writing it down. Why would I now take the time to be talking to everybody else about my concern when my concern is the concerns of the people? So that's why I was quiet and I was listening, and then I was asking questions. And then when it was time for me, I talked about the stuff that impacted everybody, but it was like, get in, get on, get out, you know. I remember one day having to explain that we were under attack by the Iranians. And they were just like dumbfounded by that. And I'm going, guys, look, our company is owned by Marion Adelson. And the Israelis and Iranians have been enemies for years. And because now she owns a company, we now are getting all these cyber attacks from the Iranians. It used to be we were getting them from Russia and China. We still get them, but now we have even more. And that we need to start thinking in terms of how do we protect the enterprise? And that you can't just bury your head in the sand, and it blows me away how difficult our jobs are, and I'm gonna get on my soapbox. They are not paying us enough. We should be the highest paid person in the room because we're the first one blamed and the sacrificial lamb. And we should, to me, it's sort of like being the quarterback. If you're gonna be the guy that gets the credit, or the blame, hey, then you should be the highest paid. So, all right, I'm gonna get out my soapbox now.
Well, I'm excited for the book, personally.
Well, I appreciate that, and I just hope it blesses people. To be honest with you, so
Yeah. Well, Renard, I'll say this, that I could not have learned so many more things, but I'm going to button it up in like 2 or 3 things that I think are the most important from this conversation, just to put a highlight for our audience members. So the first thing that I'm going to say on what I learned today, and I'm going to take away with me, is that if you're not willing to put your life on the line, you're not going to build that trust with your teammates. Doesn't matter what you do, it doesn't matter where you are. Lead from the front. That's one of the big things I'm taking away. The other thing I'm taking away is that you got to do the work. You have to be willing to spend the time, master your craft, and just go do the work without care for what that big title looks like. If you want it, you'll get it in due time. That's the other thing that I'm taking away. And the last thing I'm going to say as a lesson that I'm taking away in today's conversation is that be willing to give, because everything you've said so far is all about giving to others and in the process learning and then giving it back. So the failure references you've made every time, I looked at it as something I picked up that's new. And now it's time for me to give it back. And it's coming in the form of a book, for example, which I'm still very excited about. So, especially a signed copy. Oh my gosh, that is a treat. That is going to be a treat. And I hope you're going to be doing the audiobook, like reading it yourself. I think that would be even a special treat if you did the reading.
I hope to. I used to. Oh man, I'm dating myself now. When I was working at IBM, um, I saw an article in the newspaper that was asking for people who wanted to be DJs and be on the radio. And I answered it and found myself on a very small station in Hollywood. And I would come on late Saturday nights, um, and I would come on at 11 p.m. and go till 4 a.m. Oh boy, I used to call myself the Love Doctor, where I play slow jam, smooth grooves, and things that get you up at night. And uh, and I remember my wife would just clown me constantly, and she got to see the trajectory of me going from just doing a Saturday night show to doing an every night show. And I'll admit it was tough. I'd go to work in the daytime, go home, go to sleep, get up, go to the studio, finish at 4, run home, get 2 hours of sleep, get back to the job. And eventually I went every night, and then had built myself up to the point where I was able to do the rush hour and do the 3 to 6 time period. I'll admit that was some of the most fun that I had, was doing the radio show. And I still remember the day. I'll never forget this, when a little group of very stinky, funky dudes walked in the studio because they were coming on after me. And the DJ that came on after me was the one who broke them. And it was the band Guns N' Roses. I just, I looked at those dudes going, these guys are not going to be successful. I mean, they were terrible looking and they smelled really bad because they all lived in like a studio apartment together. And then I remember they played live. And I was sitting there like going, yeah, they may smell bad, but they can sure play. And I remember when she played a couple of their records and they took off and they ended up taking her on the road and she became one of their people. And boy, did that teach me a valuable lesson about don't ever judge a book by its cover. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Yeah, I want to do the audiobook. I am planning on having it put in many languages. I'll have to find somebody who can do the speaking in those languages. But yeah, I just want to give it away. I want to share it, and ultimately that's what I want to do. I want to eventually get to the point where I spend the majority of my time doing that, doing seminars, consulting, and just helping people succeed. And that guy from the WWE was like, I'm telling you, you will make ridiculous amounts of money if you ever decide to have your focus be that. And I found myself, man, I think it was shortly after one of the times we were talking, Renard, I just sat down and I said, I'm going to take the next 4 weeks and that's all I'm going to do, and I just start writing and writing and writing. And then I was doing other stuff while I was doing it. And last night when I was hitting the button and did that last edit and I told my wife, it's done. It's ready to go. I've been talking to book publishers and I'm fascinated by that because I had a good friend of mine who pulled me aside the other day and he's like, Phil, what's the difference between a book publisher and a record executive? And I'm like, well, what? And he's like, nothing. To think about it, they're offering you, where they want to take 70, 80% and 20 to 30% is expenses and you'll get paid X for the book when you could go a different route and you get 70% and they get, and I'm like, good point. You're right. And I found myself talking with another publisher the other day and they were like, yeah, we just want you to focus on the leader and we'll publish the book. And I'm going, then it ain't my book anymore, you know? Um, and yeah, I want to bless people and help people, but I also want to reap the benefits from it too. And I think that's only fair. So I don't know. We'll get it out. I'm hoping they're telling me it's going to take about 16 weeks to get it published, and hopefully we can get it done, before the end of summer. Uh, and uh, and then, like I said, I've already started getting people going. As soon as it hits, we want you to come on this show. We want you to come do this, come do that. And I'm just hoping that I'm blessed enough to be able to do it. So
Would love to have you back again, Phillip.
anytime, look, all it takes is, and by the way, Renard, brother, I can't tell you how much I appreciate getting those text messages from you in the morning, dude, it makes my day, So Renard will send me a text saying happy Friday or happy Monday. And I actually smile every time I get it. And I put a heart on it just to tell you, how much I love that you do that. And it means a lot to me. And so anything I can do to help you brothers, do not hesitate. I'd love to help you, take black belts in boardrooms to the heights that you want it to be. I'm ready to open the Rolodex and bring on a couple folks that I know that could actually be quite interesting. To be sitting there and talking with celebrity XYZ about technology and find how much they have a passion for it. That would be cool. Um, and at the end of the day, look, we're all on this journey together, and hopefully we can be successful in that journey.
Philip, I'll say this, and I know Renard has a strong point of view about the same thing too. I'm a big fan of helping other people become great leaders, and I know Renard shares the same passion as I do. And to hear you say that, I cannot feel any more blessed about your opportunity or your willingness to help us find those opportunities to help others. We talk about black belts and boardrooms being that channel that helps others connect with leaders who are not celebrities. Like we see celebrities everywhere, but the real stories are with folks like yourself. And to me, that is something that should be recorded and shared with others, because the stripes come in many different forms. You know, Renard's a jujitsu guy. I'm a taekwondo person, but we got stripes in taekwondo too. you know, we just get to it differently. So
Yeah.
leadership to me has so many colors and cycles and so many ways in which we get to it. I think being able to share that lesson through experience, I think, is just a gift that we want to give more of. And to do that in a way that benefits other and builds community, I think, is just the legacy we want to leave behind.
Yeah. I'll add to that before we close. Amir might not even know about this. When he asked me to do this podcast, the first thing I thought about was my grandfather, who was in the military, sergeant major, lived to the young age of 94. And when he passed, I always said, I wish I would have recorded what he did throughout that time. Because you think about somebody living for 94 years, how much they've seen. So when Amir asked me to do this podcast, it was one of those reasons. I want to see people be recorded and get to tell their story and inspire other people, because these are the things that, like writing a book and having these videos like this that'll last past your lifetime, that people can always go back. So it was one of the other reasons that I decided to join my great friend over here, Amir, and start this podcast, because I had somebody great in my life that, now is past and gone on, but I have great memories, but I wish I would have recorded. So thank you for joining us. I will definitely say that. For me, and I know for Amir, it has been a pleasure. It's been a master class. We talk outside of this, but I've learned more about you today than any of the other conversations. So we definitely appreciate it.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much. I'm so grateful and so blessed and so humbled. At the end of the day, I believe in servant leadership. My wife hates that phrase because she thinks of it as a negative, but to me, it's a positive. Um, I always think about what it took for Christ to wash the feet. If there isn't a better example of humbling oneself and giving oneself, you know, to someone else, I can't think of a better example. So um, we got to give it back, and we're blessed to be in these positions, and we want our coaching tree to be big and wide. We want a number of people to get in these positions and do well. Recently, as I've been going through some interviews, you know, they always ask you, well, why you? And one of the things I've been telling them is in the age of AI, you can make a resume look perfect, but can you actually execute? And I've told them, you're going to get somebody who's going to put it on the line every day. You want to talk about this? We can talk about it. We can make it real. And um, and that's the one thing I have to tell young people, especially because I doing a lot of interviews and been interviewing a lot of young people, and I've had to stop people during the interviews and say, I need you to stop reading, from your AI script. I need you to stop using that AI app that's giving you the answer, because all I got to do is ask you one or two follow-up questions and I'll know right away. You know, I know because I've been there. And I'm like, don't substitute the work. Don't fast path it. Put in the time. and I'm not bad mouthing the tools and stuff. Hey, God bless you if you can use it. But at the end of the day, you got to be real, because when you're in harm's way, it's the person who is real, who's earnest, who's willing to put it on the line. That's the person they're going to follow. So that's just the reality of it. But gentlemen, thank you so much. I feel so blessed. I praise God for this opportunity. I just hope that I made my mama proud today. That's how I look at it. So
I have no doubts in my mind.
I appreciate it.
So, yep. So with that, I'll bid our Black Belts and Boardrooms audience until the next one. Please, subscribe on YouTube so that this way other leaders can find the show and benefit from the content that we're putting out there. And you can reach our guest, Phillip McKibbins, on LinkedIn, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
You could find him also on other podcasts because he's also a prolific interviewer. And with that, I will say until the next one.